24 hours in winter at minus 38 degrees Celsius. That's all it took to separate the living from the dead. 24 hours. One frozen, merciless day that would decide whether Margarete Richter and her mother-in-law Gerda would see another sunrise or become just two more bodies along the endless road of refugees fleeing westward. Margarete had stopped feeling her feet 3 hours ago. She trudged forward through the snow, her breath crystallizing instantly in the air before her face, creating tiny ice particles that glittered in the pre-dawn darkness like the most cruel and beautiful diamonds imaginable. Her wool coat, once elegant, now hung from her shoulders like a frozen shell, stiff with ice and sweat and the accumulated grime of 12 days on the road. She was 38 years old, a school teacher from a small village near Breslau, a woman who, just 6 months ago, had been grading papers and tending her garden and believing, perhaps foolishly, that the war would somehow pass over their quiet corner of Silesia. How naive that belief seemed now as she placed one frozen foot in front of the other. Beside her, gripping the handle of a wooden cart that held everything they still possessed in this world, walked her mother-in-law, Gerda Richter, 73 years old. Arthritic hands that had once played Chopin with such grace that audiences in Berlin had wept with the beauty of her performance. Now those same hands, wrapped in rags, clutched a rope attached to a cart containing 2 blankets, a cooking pot, 3 potatoes, and a photograph of her son, Margaret's husband Hans, who had been missing on the Eastern Front for 11 agonizing months. The column of refugees stretched for kilometers in both directions. Thousands upon thousands of Germans fleeing the advancing Soviet forces. Women, the elderly, the infirm. Almost no men of fighting age remained. They had all been swallowed by the war machine years ago, sent to fronts from which most would never return. The snow crunched beneath thousands of feet in a rhythm that had become hypnotic. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of survival. The sound of desperation. The sound of an entire population in motion, driven by a fear so primal it overrode exhaustion, hunger, and even the body's screaming demand to simply stop and rest. Because stopping meant dying. Everyone on this road understood that truth in their bones. The thermometer, if anyone had possessed one, would have shown minus 32 degrees Celsius at 4 in the morning. By dawn, it would plummet further. By noon, it would reach minus 38. The kind of cold that didn't just freeze water, the kind of cold that froze the moisture in your lungs, that turned exposed skin black within minutes. 3 days ago, Margarete had watched a woman simply sit down by the side of the road. The woman had been walking beside them for 2 days, a seamstress from Liegnitz named Hilda, perhaps 50 years old, with kind eyes and a nervous habit of humming hymns under her breath. She had been humming when she suddenly stopped walking, looked at Margarete with an expression of profound apology, and said those terrible words. "I just need to rest for a moment." She sat down in the snow. Margarete had tried to pull her up, had begged, had screamed. But the column kept moving, and Gerda could not stop, and the Soviet artillery was rumbling somewhere behind them, and Hilda had simply closed her eyes and smiled and said, "It's warm now. It's finally warm." That was the cruelest lie the cold told. In the final stages of hypothermia, as the body's core temperature dropped below survivable levels, the blood vessels near the skin suddenly dilated. Warm blood rushed to the surface. The dying person felt a flood of heat, of comfort, of peace. And then they died. Margarete had not looked back. Looking back meant seeing the truth of what this road had become. A graveyard stretching from the Oder River to the heart of Germany. Margarete. Gerda's voice was thin, almost lost in the wind. "Margarete, I need to stop." Margarete felt her heart clench. Those were the words, the beginning of the end, the same words Hilda had spoken. "No." Margarete grabbed her mother-in-law's arm. "No stopping. We keep walking." "My chest." Gerda pressed her free hand against her sternum. "Something is wrong." "Nothing is wrong. You're tired. We're all tired. But we keep walking." "I can't breathe properly." Margarete looked at her mother-in-law's face and felt fear grip her heart. The bluish tinge around her lips, the shallow gasps, the glassy quality in her eyes. Gerda had suffered from heart troubles for years. The village doctor had warned her against exertion, against stress, against cold. And here she was, 73 years old, pulling a cart through -32-degree weather, fleeing an advancing army, having walked over 200 kilometers in 12 days. It was a miracle she was still alive. We need to find shelter. Margaret scanned the landscape around them. Flat, white, endless. The road cut through farmland abandoned weeks ago. In the distance, perhaps half a kilometer away, she saw a dark shape against the snow, a building of some kind. What if there are soldiers? Gerda asked weakly. Then we deal with that when we get there. Right now, the only thing killing us is this cold, and I refuse to watch you die on this road. She took the cart handle from Gerda's frozen fingers and began to pull. They left the column. They stepped off the road and into the snow-covered field, moving toward the dark shape in the distance. Behind them, the river of refugees continued to flow, barely noticing their departure. 2 more women swallowed by the white expanse. 2 more statistics in a catastrophe too vast to comprehend. The building was a farmhouse, or rather, it had been a farmhouse. Half of the roof had collapsed, torn away by some explosion, but the other half still had walls, a partial roof, and the potential for shelter. Margaret pushed through the broken door, guiding Gerda into the darkness. Through a doorway at the back, she saw what made her heart leap with desperate hope. A wood-burning stove, small, cast iron, covered in dust, but intact. Finding fuel was the first challenge. Broken furniture, old newspapers. Her fingers fumbled with the matches. The first match broke. The second wouldn't strike. The third caught briefly, then died in a gust of wind from the broken window. She had 7 matches left. 7 chances to make fire. 7 chances to keep Gerda alive. She cupped her hands around the 4th match, shielding it from the wind. The sulfur flared. The flame caught. She touched it to the paper and held her breath. The paper blackened, curled, smoked, and then, miraculously, it caught fire. Warmth began to spread through the small room. Margaret pulled Gerda closer to the stove, wrapping her in both blankets, positioning her as near to the heat as she dared. The blue tinge around her lips began to fade. "You did it," Gerda whispered. "You wonderful, stubborn girl. You did it." The relief was overwhelming. But Margaret knew they couldn't stay long. The Soviets were coming. Everyone said they were coming. And there were terrible rumors about what happened to German women when they caught them. Then she heard it. Footsteps outside. Her hand reached automatically for the kitchen knife. The footsteps grew closer. 2 sets of feet approaching the farmhouse. The broken door creaked. A voice called out in German. Female. Trembling. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please. We need help." 2 women stood in the entrance, snow clinging to their coats. One was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked hair. The other was younger, maybe 25, with eyes that had seen too much. "We saw the smoke," the older woman said. "We hoped—" "Come in. There's a fire." 4 women now, huddled around a dying fire in a destroyed farmhouse while the coldest day of winter descended upon them. This was survival in January 1945. This was the reality of ordinary Germans struggling to survive the war's end. The older woman's name was Brigitte Hoffmann. She had been a factory worker in Breslau, operating machines that made ammunition for the Wehrmacht until the evacuation order came. Her husband had died at Stalingrad 3 years ago. Her son had been killed in Normandy 6 months later. She was entirely alone now, walking toward a future she couldn't imagine. The younger woman was Anna Schmidt. She didn't say much about herself, only that she came from a village near Oppeln, only that she had been walking for 8 days, only that she had left behind things she would never speak of. Margaret didn't press. Everyone on that road had left behind things they would never speak of. The war had created millions of stories that would go untold. The 4 women arranged themselves around the small stove, sharing body heat and silence. Outside, the wind had picked up, driving snow through the broken windows. The temperature continued to drop. "How long can we stay here?" Brigitte asked. "A few hours. Until Gerda regains some strength." "The column," Anna laughed bitterly. "The column of the Walking Dead, that's what we are. We're already dead. We just haven't stopped moving yet." "Don't say that." Gerda's voice was stronger now. We're alive. As long as we're alive, there's hope. Hope for what? The Soviets are coming. The Americans are coming. Germany is finished. Everything we knew, everything we were, it's all gone. What is there to hope for? The question hung in the air. Because Anna was right. The Germany they had known was dying. The war that had consumed the world for 6 years was ending, and the country that had started it would pay a price no one could yet fully imagine. But Margaret refused to accept despair. We hope for tomorrow. We hope for one more day, and then another. That's all any of us can do. The 3 potatoes they had brought were the only food among the 4 of them. Anna had nothing. Brigitte had a small piece of hard bread, frozen solid. Margaret divided everything carefully. Each woman received small pieces of raw potato and a fragment of bread. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And in this new world of absolute scarcity, something was everything. I used to make the most wonderful potato soup, Gerda said dreamily, with cream from our neighbor's cow. My Heinrich loved that soup. My mother made Kartoffelpuffer. Brigitte closed her eyes. Crispy on the outside, soft inside. I can still taste them. Anna's tears came again, freezing on her cheeks. No one spoke of the food they used to eat. The memories were too painful. It was Brigitte who finally asked the question hanging unspoken among them. Anna, what happened to you? Before you started walking. Anna stared at the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. The Soviets reached our village 4 days before the evacuation order came. 4 days too early. My mother and I hid in the cellar. We heard them above us, taking things, breaking things. We thought if we stayed quiet, they would leave. The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They found us. They took my mother first, made me watch. She was 52 years old, a baker's wife who had never hurt anyone. Her voice broke. She didn't survive. And I survived. I walked out 3 days later and haven't stopped since. Margaret reached out and took Anna's hand. There was no comfort to offer. This story was being repeated thousands of times across Eastern Germany. German civilians were paying a terrible price for crimes committed in their nation's name. The cycle of violence had come full circle. At midday, they heard engines, multiple vehicles on the road. Who's military? German soldiers might help. Soviet soldiers. Put out the fire, Margaret decided. They smothered the flames with snow. Within minutes, the temperature began to drop. They huddled together in darkness, 4 women pressed against each other, listening to engines fade into distance. By afternoon, Gerda was struggling again. Her breathing labored, her lips blue. We need to relight the fire, Margaret said. She won't survive without it. 4 matches left. The first struck true. Within minutes, the stove was radiating heat again. Thank me when we reach the American lines, Margaret said with forced optimism. Do you really think we'll make it that far? We have to believe we will. Otherwise, what's the point? If you were in Margaret's position, would you have the strength to keep going? Drop a comment below and tell me, I would never give up. Because these women didn't, and their story isn't over yet. Brigitte spoke next, voice thick with something that might have been shame. I worked in the ammunition factory for 3 years, making bullets, shells, bombs. 3 years of contributing to everything. You had no choice, Margaret said. Did we? My husband, Karl, he believed in it all. The party, the Führer. He died at Stalingrad, abandoned by generals who promised victory. She paused. My son was different. He wrote me letters that would have gotten him shot. He said he hoped the war would end, even if Germany lost. Because what we allowed to happen was unforgivable. What we allowed to happen. Those 5 words contained an accusation each woman understood. The neighbors who disappeared in the night. The whispered rumors about camps in the east. They had known. Not everything, but enough. And they had done nothing. We all carry guilt, Margaret said quietly. But guilt won't bring back the dead. All we can do now is survive and perhaps find a way to make amends. How do you make amends for the unforgivable? No one had an answer. The question would haunt all of Germany for generations. They took turns keeping watch through the night. Margaret thought about her husband Hans. A carpenter who built furniture with surprising beauty. 11 months since his last letter. She still hoped he was alive somewhere, though the hope was irrational. Outside, the temperature dropped to minus 41 degrees Celsius. The coldest night of the war. Morning revealed a transformed world. Snow had fallen throughout the night, accumulating in drifts that reached past the windows. The road was invisible. Everything was white, flat, featureless. A frozen desert without landmarks. "We can't leave in this," Brigitte said. "We have no food, almost no fuel. If we stay here, we die. If we go out there, we die faster." The argument was circular. Stay and starve. Leave and freeze. Two paths to the same destination. Then Gerda collapsed. It happened without warning. One moment sitting up, the next on the floor, eyes rolled back, breath coming in gasping bursts. "Gerda!" Margaret was at her side instantly. "Can you hear me?" No response. The old woman's eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow, her skin cold and clammy despite the fire. "Her heart," Brigitte said grimly. "She's having some kind of attack. What do we do? We're not doctors." They did the only thing they could. Kept her warm, elevated her feet, spoke to her constantly, and prayed. Hours passed. Gerda drifted in and out of consciousness, her condition neither improving nor worsening. "We need help," Margaret said desperately. "Medical help, supplies, something. There's no help to be had. Not here. Not now." Anna spoke up. "I saw another building before the convoy passed. Larger. Maybe a village. A kilometer away. 1 kilometer. In this cold. In this snow. Without knowing what waited at the end. It was madness. It was also their only chance. "I'll go," Margaret decided. "If I'm not back by nightfall, leave at first light. Head west. Don't wait for me. Margaret, promise me." Brigitte's eyes filled with tears. "I promise." Margaret knelt beside Gerda and whispered in her ear, "I'm going to find help, Mama. Don't you dare die while I'm gone. You hear me? Don't you dare." No response. But she thought she felt a slight squeeze of her hand. A promise. She wrapped herself in every piece of clothing she could find. She stepped out into the snow, and she began to walk. The cold was immediate and absolute. It hit her like a physical blow, driving the breath from her lungs. The wind cut through her layers as if they were paper. The snow was past her knees in places. She walked. Time ceased to have meaning. Minutes felt like hours. She existed somewhere between consciousness and unconsciousness, driven forward by nothing more than will. Images flickered through her mind. Hans on their wedding day. Gerda teaching her to make strudel. Faces, voices, memories, ghosts. She walked. And then, impossibly, she saw it. A building, large, intact, smoke rising from a chimney. Life. A man stood in the doorway. Old, perhaps 70, with a face weathered by decades of farm work. "Come in, before you freeze to death on my doorstep." Warmth hit her like a wave. A woman named Helga wrapped her in blankets, pressed hot liquid into her trembling hands. "There are others." Margaret forced the words out through frozen lips. 3 others, in a farmhouse, half a kilometer east. One of them is dying. The old man, Friedrich, was already pulling on a heavy coat. "I'll take the sleigh. Tell me where." She described the farmhouse. Friedrich left within minutes. Then the warmth, the relief, the sudden absence of adrenaline all combined to drag her down. She slept. She woke to voices, many voices, and the familiar sound of Gerda's papery laugh. Gerda sat by the fire, alive, awake, smiling. "You did it," Gerda said. "You wonderful, stubborn girl. You did it." Margareta burst into tears. She cried for Gerda, for Hans, for Hilda who sat down and never stood again, for Anna's mother and Brigitte's husband, for all the millions who had died and would continue to die until this terrible war finally ended. Helga held her while she cried. When the tears stopped, Margaret felt emptied but somehow lighter. "Friedrich found them just in time," Helga said. "Another hour and..." If this story is touching your heart, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that even in the darkest times, human kindness can save lives. Friedrich and Helga had lived on this farm for 45 years. They had weathered the First War, the chaos that followed, the coming of the Nazis. When the evacuation order came, they refused to leave. "Where would we go?" Friedrich said. "We're too old to start over. This is our home. If we die here, at least we die somewhere we belong." Late that night, Gerda spoke to Margaret by the dying fire. "I thought I was going to die in that farmhouse. I made my peace with it. I prayed and told myself it was all right, that I had lived a good life, that I would see Heinrich again." "You're not dying," Margaret said fiercely. "Not today. Not tomorrow. I've been thinking about guilt, about what we allowed to happen. Guilt alone is worthless. It's a luxury we can't afford. What matters is what we do next, how we live, how we treat each other. Whether we can find courage to be better than we were. Can we? After everything? I don't know. But I know we have to try. That's all any of us can do." The sun rose on a transformed world. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of crystalline beauty. Snow sparkled in the morning light, untouched and perfect, as if the violence and suffering that had marked this land had been erased, covered over, made clean. It was an illusion, of course. The bodies along the road were still there, hidden beneath the white blanket. The burned villages were still ruins. The advancing armies were still coming. But for this one morning, in this one place, there was peace. Margaret stood at the window, watching the sun rise, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, perhaps, or at least the absence of despair. "You should eat something," Helga said from behind her. "You'll need your strength for whatever comes next." "What does come next? Do we stay? Do we go? I don't know anymore." Helga considered the question carefully. "There's no right answer. There's only the answer that feels most true to who you are. Friedrich and I chose to stay because this land is who we are. But you're different. You're younger. You have more life ahead of you. More possibilities. More uncertainty. Yes, but also more potential. Whatever you decide it for yourself. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, out of your own deepest truth." They left the farmstead 3 days later. Gerda had recovered enough to travel, though slowly. Friedrich had given them directions to the nearest major road where they could rejoin the columns of refugees heading west. Helga had packed food, bread, dried meat, a precious jar of preserved vegetables, enough to sustain them for several days. The parting was difficult. Margaret stood at the door, her eyes filled with tears. "How can we ever repay you?" she asked. "You can live," Friedrich said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You can survive. Find your way to whatever future awaits and make something good out of it. That's all the payment we need. If you ever need anything, we won't," Helga smiled. "But the offer means more than you know. Now go, before the weather changes again." They walked out into the snow. Margaret, Gerda, Brigitte, and Anna. 4 women bound together by circumstances, by survival, by a shared experience that would connect them for the rest of their lives. The road was ahead. The future was unknown. But they were alive. And as Gerda had said, that was when it mattered most. The column was still there. Thinner now, diminished by days of cold and hunger and despair, but still moving. Still flowing westward like a river that could not be stopped. The women rejoined it without ceremony, slipping back into the mass of humanity as if they had never left. But something had changed. The days in the farmhouse, the warmth, the kindness of strangers, all of it had left a mark. They walked with more purpose, more determination. The defeated shuffle had been replaced by something approaching genuine movement. Anna spoke first, breaking the silence. "I've decided something. When this is over, I'm going to become a nurse. I'm going to spend my life helping people, healing them." "You have nothing to make up for," Margaret said gently. "I know I wasn't responsible for what was done to me, but I'm responsible for what I do next. I choose to help. I choose to believe human beings can be good, even after everything I've seen." "We all have to think about that," Gerda said softly. "All of Germany. When this is over, We'll have to rebuild. Not just buildings and roads, but our souls, our national conscience. Late afternoon, they heard engines growing louder. The column stopped, frozen with fear, as vehicles appeared on the road behind them. Trucks, jeeps, military vehicles, but not German, and not Soviet, American. The vehicles moved slowly through the column, soldiers looking out at the refugees with expressions that mixed wariness with pity. No one spoke. No one moved. The tension was absolute. Then one of the soldiers stood up in his jeep and called out in broken German, "War over soon. Keep walking west. Help ahead." War over soon. The words spread through the column like wildfire. People wept. People collapsed to their knees in the snow. People embraced complete strangers and sobbed with a hope they had not dared to feel in years. Margaret stood frozen, unable to process what she had heard. War over soon. Could it be true? After 6 years of hell, could it actually be ending? Gerda took her hand and squeezed. "You see?" The old woman's voice trembled with emotion. "We made it. We survived. It's not over yet," Margaret said cautiously. "We still have far to go, but we have direction now. We have hope." The American convoy passed, leaving behind it a transformed column. People who had been walking with the shuffle of the defeated now moved with something approaching energy. The end was in sight. The nightmare was almost over. Whatever came next, occupation, rebuilding, the long, slow work of coming to terms with national guilt, they would face it, because they were alive. And that was everything. That evening, Gerda called Margarete aside. Her face was peaceful. "I've been thinking about Hans. Whatever happened to him, he would be proud of you. So proud. The way you've kept us going. The way you've refused to give up. That stubbornness will get you through whatever comes next. That will let you build a new life, even if Hans is gone." Margaret leaned into her embrace. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for keeping me alive. We'll face the future together, whatever it holds." The sun rose on their 15th day since leaving home, though it felt like a lifetime. The column continued to move westward, but the pace had changed. There was purpose now, direction, hope. The rumor of the war's imminent end had spread through the refugees like medicine, healing wounds that had seemed beyond help. Margaret walked at the front of their small group, pulling the cart with Gerda's meager possessions, looking ahead at the road that stretched before them. The snow was beginning to melt in places, revealing patches of brown earth beneath. Spring was coming. Behind her, Anna and Brigitte talked quietly, making plans for the future they had not dared to imagine before. Gerda rested in the cart, conserving her strength, but her eyes were bright with something that might have been joy. 24 hours in winter, at -38 degrees Celsius. That was what the title of this story promised. But the truth was both simpler and more complex than that single day of frozen survival. The truth was that ordinary people, women, the elderly, those who had never asked for war, never wanted it, never imagined they would be caught in its machinery, had found within themselves reserves of strength they didn't know they possessed. They had faced unimaginable hardship and had not broken. They had confronted their nation's guilt and had not collapsed into despair. They had survived. And in surviving, they had proven something important about the human spirit, about its capacity for endurance, about its refusal to surrender even when surrender seemed the only logical choice. The road ahead was long. The challenges were immense. The work of rebuilding both a nation and their own lives would take years, perhaps decades. But they would do it, because that was what ordinary people did when extraordinary circumstances demanded it. They endured. They persisted. They found a way. And when the history of those terrible years was finally written, these women, Margaret, Gerda, Brigitte, Anna, would not appear in its pages. Their names would not be remembered. Their struggles would not be documented. But their spirit would live on, passed down through generations, embodied in every person who refused to give up when giving up would have been so much easier. This was the true legacy of the war's end. Not the treaties signed or the territories divided, but the quiet, stubborn resilience of ordinary people who chose to survive. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can endure. And give this video a like to help others find these stories of survival and hope.